Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C311.
They're good. They're just chatty.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Local Land Use and Community Living Work Group of the Virginia Housing Commission. I am Delegate David Bulova, and honored to be chair of this particular work group. I know for those of you who were at this morning's work group meeting, this is a long day of housing issues, but really appreciate everybody sticking around, and thank you to all of our work group members in advance for your hard work. This is the first of what will be several work group meetings this year in order to be able to talk about a number of different issues that came up during the General Assembly session that might not have made it through the General Assembly session, but was merited further discussion to be able to go ahead and flesh out. For those of you who are not familiar with the work group, so we don't make final decisions. Our job is to take issues, work through them, ask the right questions, and see if we're able to come up with consensus that we can recommend to the full Housing Commission, which would then make a decision about whether to make a recommendation for the General Assembly. We do take pride in that we are a consensus-driven group, and so we want to make sure that what comes out of the Housing Commission is something that by and large is very well vetted through, has general support, and that we feel pretty confident we can get through the General Assembly. That said, the discussions in themselves, even if a piece of legislation is not endorsed, I hope that they are valuable. And so even if there is not consensus, the discussion can be very telling with respect to what kind of issues might be raised if legislation is introduced, and gives all the stakeholders an opportunity to understand what those are and to react and respond. I will note that today we will not be wrapping up any conversations. This is a listen and discuss. And we want to make sure we're getting all those issues on the table, and we're not going to be taking anything off the table during this particular meeting. At this point, just so that the people in the audience have a sense of who we have up here at the dais, I'd like everybody to give a quick introduction about themselves and their role on the work group. And so I'm going to start with the far right. Christy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christy Mara with the Virginia Poverty Law Center.
Erin Corman with Virginia Realtors.
I'm Randy Grumbine, and I represent the Virginia Manufacturing Auto Housing Association. I hit the wrong button, I'm sorry.
Visma Ahmed with the Apartment and Office Building Association and the Virginia Apartment Management Association.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Hudgens, and I'm with the Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia.
Hello, Ashley Welburn, gubernatorial appointee with Welburn Management.
Hi, I'm Delegate Carrie Coiner. I represent the 75th District, which is home to portions of Chesterfield County, portion of Prince George County, and the entire city of Hopewell.
And I am Delegate David Bulova. I represent the 11th House District, which is the city of Fairfax and parts of Central Fairfax County.
I'm Elizabeth Pollen. I'm Director of Virginia Housing Commission.
Good afternoon. Senator Ghazala Hashmi representing the 15th Senatorial District, which is parts of City of Richmond and Chesterfield County.
Andrew Clark with the Home Builders Association of Virginia.
Pia Trigiani, practicing lawyer. I live up in Alexandria. My practice is across the Commonwealth, typically representing common interest community associations.
Fabrizio Fasulu with Virginia Housing.
Kelly Harris Braxton, Virginia First Cities Coalition.
And Troy Garrett, Executive Director for the Virginia Association of Housing and Community Development Officials.
All right, great. And thank you very much.
And David, I'm Danny Marshall of the 49th House District.
Oh, very good. Welcome, Danny. Glad that you're able to join us.
Thank you.
All right, so I think as you all can see, we do have a very diverse group of stakeholders up here, and that's on purpose because these are the same kind of interests that would be debating any legislation during the General Assembly session. So again, I really appreciate everybody's time and their work as we work through these different issues. We have 4 items on today's agenda, and so I'm going to turn the mic over to Director Pollen, and she is going to give a little bit of an overview of what the agenda holds.
Good afternoon, everybody. Each of the issues today came from the legislative session, with the exception of the last one, which is the right of first refusal. And that came to us from 2 different sources. One of our own commission member, Senator Bill Stanley, and the mayor of Alexandria both asked us to study that issue. Jessica Hoff, who's the policy analyst for the commission, will give an overview of the topic, but as today's chair shared with us, it is a starting point for conversation. It's not the end-all and be-all today. Each of the topics today have proponents and opponents for each topic. There will be opportunity to ask questions after each topic has gone through, and I will give a very brief overview of the topic before we begin the declarant control issue. Thank you so much. The first topic we have is House Bill 2542 from the last General Assembly session on amateur radios.
All right, so as Director Pollen mentioned, so our first up deals with amateur radio. This is a bill, House Bill 2542, that came up and was introduced into the House from Delegate Seabold, came to the Housing Subcommittee of General Laws, and was subsequently referred here. This is an area where we haven't necessarily dealt with amateur radio. We are familiar with issues when it comes to what may or may not be prohibited within a declaration with a common interest community. And so I know we've passed legislation with respect to solar, and we've debated things like pollinator gardens, but appreciate that we've got a range of different interest groups that are here to present before us today. Looking forward to the discussion, but Delegate Seabold would be happy to invite you to set the foundation for the discussion.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity. My name is Delegate Holly Seabold. I represent the 12th District. Appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little more about amateur radios. I brought this legislation in this session 2025. It was HB 2542. I brought it as a result of constituents in my district who have been prohibited from placing antennas in their communities. This legislation specifically would ensure that HOAs cannot prohibit property owners from installing amateur radio antennas in areas that they own or have exclusive control over. Now, this is an issue because while devices like satellites and TV antennas are permitted, amateur radio antennas are not, and they're merely just brushed off as a hobby. And we would argue that it is much more than just a hobby. It is actually a critical role and infrastructure that is proactive during emergencies. And so I provided you with a few handouts, some information from the National National Ham Radio Association. In 1996, Congress ordered the FCC to to make sure that private land is not prohibited to use restrictions that prevent a homeowner's installation of exterior antennas and antenna support structures for over-the-air reception devices. And I'll mention OTAR a few times, so that's the acronym. And that these devices specifically, specifically devices and structures for TV reception, satellite TV, and wireless internet are not excluded from neighborhoods. However, when this law was passed, it did not apply to our amateur radio antennas. And so we would love to see Virginia be the leader on this initiative and make sure that ham radio operators are able to place those antennas in their community. As you see, if you flip to the next page, on the PowerPoint presentation that you have in front of you, that there are many key responsibilities of amateur radio services. And, I won't bore you with all the details. You can read that here. And amateur radio is also considered critical infrastructure, and it has a little information for you on the sheet of why that is. In addition, STEM education, innovation, and research, there's many impacts of STEM education towards STEM education, innovation, and research from amateur radios. But again, we can't be using amateur radios unless there's an antenna attached to it. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, it is critical infrastructure. When all else fails, the only thing that's still going to be around are ham radios. And so they have been utilized in emergency situations. If you flip to the next page, I'm looking right here, it shows you some of the examples of ways that amateur radios have been used in past emergencies, like the Boston Marathon bombing, Katrina response, a few incidents in Oregon, and during the New Mexico wildfires. And I would also like to share with you, in the second handout that I passed along, going back to the original point that I made about the FCC and what is allowed under the OTAR rules, we can see the different pictures on the second handout I have in front of you of what is legal in a homeowners association under the Telecommunications Act of 1996. You'll see that that a TV antenna, that is actually the legal size of an antenna that is permitted in a HOA. We have satellite dishes in the second page. That's a picture of what is allowed. A flagpole, that's of this size, is permitted in an HOA. And so, given those examples, I placed at the last sheet in the last sheet of this packet what a antenna looks like for a ham radio operator, and it's very minimal. This is an example of it. Obviously, there's lots of different antennas, but this is one that is very thin, minimal, and does not strike me as something that would be should be prohibitive. I've also brought with me my constituent, who is a ham operator, and I would love for him to go into more details, Mr. Chair, about ham radios and the size of the antennas.
All right, very good. Did you want to hold off on taking questions until?
Yeah, I think so, Mr. Chair, that might make sense, because I know while I present this information to you, I am not an expert in the field, so I would love to have an expert speak towards what we're
very good
discussing today.
Welcome.
And this is, and I'll let him introduce himself, but this is Ben Hofstadter. Thank you.
Everybody, good afternoon. Members of the Housing Commission, staff, and guests, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you here today.
Yep, and if you could introduce yourself first.
Okay, my name is Ben Hofstadter. If I need to spell that for the record.
No, you're good.
I'd like to extend a special thanks to Delegate Seabold and her staff, who've been extremely responsive to the concerns and interests of amateur radio operators in her district, including me and the Commonwealth. I am a proud federal employee, and I've called Virginia my home state since 1997. My wife and I have 2 children, and we bought our home in Fairfax County in 2009, and prior to that, I lived in Arlington County. I've been a licensed amateur radio operator since 1998. According to the American Radio Relay League, or ARRL, there are approximately 21,000 licensed amateur radio operators in Virginia. Today, I'd like to give some information about amateur radio and why it's important for the General Assembly to consider legislation that would allow amateur radio operators like me to use their equipment in their own homes. So amateur radio, also known as ham radio, is one of several radio services sanctioned and administered by the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC grants 3 amateur radio service licenses: technician, general, and extra. The technician license is considered the entry level, general is the mid-level, and extra class is the top level. There's no age restrictions, but those who want to obtain an amateur license must pass an official exam for each license. Each step up in license type provides additional privileges to transmit on frequencies exclusively set aside for amateur radio. And for myself, I have an extra class license. Amateur radio is a fun hobby that offers opportunities to learn about science, technology, and communication, but it's more than just a hobby. Amateur radio operators help their communities by assisting with public events. They also provide life-saving emergency communications at no cost to taxpayers when traditional systems like cell phone service and the internet are overloaded or fail. Trained amateur radio operators who are certified in emergency communications, or what we call EMCOM, partner with first responder professionals to assist with emergency and disaster situations. These amateur operators provide a public service and communications expertise. Even if internet service, power lines, and phone lines are down, amateur radio can still get the message through. The American Radio Relay League organizes ARES, the Amateur Radio Emergency Services, across 7 divisions in the Commonwealth to provide trained amateur radio operators operating out of their homes or to deploy to a disaster zone as needed. ARES trained personnel are prepared to respond to all hazard situations, from natural disasters to man-made. Some amateur radio operators are members of the National Weather Service's Skywarn spotter network. From their homes, these trained men and women can provide severe weather warnings to their counties and communities. Amateur radio operators communicate with other licensed operators around town, throughout the state, across the country. Sometimes we even speak to other licensed operators around the world. Some radios can have low power and be carried around, like the one in my hand. Others are slightly larger and can be installed in a vehicle or a house. So, of course, this one being the most portable. All radios need some type of antenna to transmit audio and to receive. Amateur radio stations are safe because by law, radio amateurs must be licensed to operate and comply with safety regulations and guidelines. Amateur operators must ensure that the use of their equipment does not expose themselves or others to harmful radio frequency levels. When operating from a home, several types of amateur radio antennas can be used, like wire antennas, like Delegate Siebel was talking about. So think of something like this, but probably at least 50 feet in length or longer. Vertical antennas, the analogy I would use would be a broomstick, so basically 5 feet or longer in length, often attached to a chimney. And directional metal antennas, which resemble your old TV roof antennas, except larger. And these can be mounted on roofs, chimneys, or just in the backyard, like you can put the wire in the trees. The size and the visibility varies. Which antenna you select basically depends on the frequency or frequencies you want to communicate on, how far you want to communicate. Generally speaking, the higher your antenna, the better for transmitting and receiving. And some operators have a rotator, which allows you to actually turn your antenna, which improves its efficiency. With regard to efficiency, outdoor antennas are much better than indoor antennas. So on the issue of HOAs, according to the ARRL, almost 1/4 of Virginia's total population lives in an HOA community. And I happen to be a constituent that also lives in the HOA, as we alluded to earlier. Although difficult to quantify, many amateur radio operators face private land use restrictions, including HOA covenants, that inhibit or prohibit their ability to operate radio equipment from their homes. For example, in my HOA, the covenants, which were approved almost half a century ago, only permit TV antennas and forbid homeowners from mounting any other type. Any attempt to amend a covenant requires 75% of homeowners to vote in favor, which is nowadays basically an impossible task. In the past few years, the General Assembly has passed legislation to remove severe restrictions HOAs placed on homeowners who wanted to install solar panels on their homes. To advance the public safety benefits that amateur radio brings to our communities, I respectfully request that the General Assembly pass new legislation in the next session to override private land use restrictions that impede or prohibit amateur radio operators from installing and operating outdoor antennas at their place of residence. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Does anybody have any immediate questions? And it was at Mr. Hofstetter, is that correct? Hofstetter or Delegate Seabold before we turn it over to our next speakers? And if you could both stick around, because I know people will have questions. I've got a couple of them if they're not raised. Okay. All right. So up next, if we could have Steve Radloff, who's the president of the Selma Estates and is also a ham radio operator. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Appreciate being here. And if I can get my charts up here. I got some charts. I'm going to show you some pictures. Delegate Siebel, Ben, thank you for the lead in here, the segue into mine. What I'm going to do is just going to show you some antennas. And these antennas, I'll introduce myself, right? Steve Radloff. I'm currently the president of the Selma Estates Homeowners Association. I've been the president for about the past 2.5 years. Before that, I was on the Architectural Review Board, where I was also the chair of that. And basically have been in these capacities since our developer turned over the HOA to the homeowners. I'm also a ham radio operator, a member of the Loudoun County Amateur Radio Emergency Services Organization, and also a trained weather spotter for the National Weather Service, which relies in some part on the ham radio infrastructure to provide inputs. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Next chart, if we could, please. So a lot of times when you talk to people, the first thing they think of when you see antennas is they see the large tower, 65 feet, with these big monsters on top. Or if you live in Ukraine or Russia, you're in a community of them. And I know that's not quite what we want in most of our communities. I'm not sure I want one in my community like that, right? But the bottom line is they are there. And if you talk to any amateur radio operator, they're going to tell you what are the most important things you need in order to be a successful ham. And the answer is 3 words: antenna, antenna, antenna. The higher up, sometimes the bigger, the more area you've got to collect the signal, the better off you're going to be. So the trade-off between the efficiencies and with the types of antennas you can use. Next chart. As the previous speaker mentioned, some of our ham antennas look just like the TV antennas that you see, and they're authorized in HOAs. You can also convert a satellite dish to be a ham radio antenna. The only difference between them here is that you've got a little bit of different feed out there on the arm in front collecting the signal, and the way it's going to be oriented. It's going to be aimed primarily at the horizon versus out into space. But aesthetically, it looks very similar. Okay, next chart. So how have I worked around some of the HOA covenants? By using different things in my house. At my house, I've got 9 active amateur radio antennas going right now. 3 of them are outside, 2 or the other 6 are inside, and 2 of those 6 are in the attic. You see the area highlighted in yellow there? That's my front gutter. I use that as an antenna. It can be done, it works. It's not as efficient as those ones that are up on top of the 65-foot tower, but it does work. The other antenna that's outside is actually behind that bush, and you'll see it in the next picture. But basically, If you look, see on the, I guess that's going to be your right, you can see where I've got a wire attached to my gutter, goes to that silver device that is grounded and stuck into the ground, and then there's a coax that goes through a window into my ham shack. That is the antenna. Next chart. And on the back side of the house, well, here on the left, my left, how you don't look at that? Yeah, it's going to be on your left too. Okay, you can see behind the tree on top of the green stake there, the small antenna I've got that's outdoors. And it's one that could be connected to the radio that Mr. Hofstetter had and allow him to be able to reach further than the antenna that he had on that radio. Okay, then on the back antenna, you can see a slightly different setup. But again, unless you're in the backyard, you're looking over my fence, you really can't see it. It's not visible from the street, and it's not visible from the sidewalk. Next chart, please. So I've got a bunch up in the attic. I've got a 45, 50-foot wide attic, and up in there is the antenna, or two antennas. One you can see is a white pole there in the center. That's about 8.5 feet high and is used to communicate on the VHF bands. And the other antenna, called a fan dipole, kind of hard to see, but if you look up about 2/3 of the way up the left picture there, you can see some wires running from left to right. That is a high-frequency antenna that allows me to communicate in the high-frequency bands. And that particular antenna will operate on about 5 different frequencies. And it's supported in the center, and it's called a dipole. Goes basically 40 feet across in my attic. And so basically, I've found alternatives to how to deploy antennas within the restrictive covenants of my HOA, which actually prohibits ham radio antennas, and been able to get up, and a lot of people don't even know I'm doing it, okay, because they can't see it. All right, and so there's really no legislation required for some of these alternative antennas, but there is maybe legislation that might be required to allow ham radios to be in in our communities. So next chart if I could. So with that rather inefficient radio antenna network, I've made over 18,000 contacts in 180 different DX entities, of which there are 340 in the world. I've gotten to Australia, New Zealand, Greenland, Falkland Islands, off the coast of Madagascar, Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe and the United States. Okay, so it's doable, okay? And if I could get some of these antennas outside, would probably be a whole lot better. And I'm also, by the way, operating at only 100 watts. The maximum power output allowed is 1,500 watts. So I'm operating lower power and with compromised antennas and still able to do some of the things I want to do with my radio operations. Now I want to show you, if I can have the next chart, some other alternatives that are out there. Up there, the cartoon, you take a device like this right here, take about 65 feet of wire, and you run it between your house and a tree. I can talk around the world. In fact, on this particular setup, I've talked around the world, okay, when I deploy it out in the field. It can be done. Not very observable, not a big tower, not going to bring down our property values. If you've got a Martin birdhouse, you can use the guy wires to hold it up, convert those into antennas, okay? Again, not intrusive, not overly burdensome. And in the other picture there, if you've got lots of trees on your lot, you can hide the antennas maybe in the trees. So it can be done. It's not hard to be able to hide the antennas and use different deployment methods. Next chart. Also, the palm tree, that's of course is not Virginia, but it's actually down in Florida, where you actually take the wire and just wrap it around the tree, and that becomes your antenna on the tree. Okay, again, that's technically prohibited by some of our covenants, but here's a way that, again, doesn't look overly intrusive. The other pictures with the trees are where we've put up poles and or wires or wrapped wires around in the trees to act as the antenna. It works. Now, some of you all might be asking, well, that's energy. Is there a fire hazard with that? When you're operating at about 100 watts, no fire hazard, no issue there. But if you go over that, then yes, you're probably going to have some issues, especially if you're at the 1500. Other alternatives on the next chart would be hidden antennas. Flagpoles. There's actually a company that makes flagpoles designed for ham radio operators. So if the community allows those, you've got a way to do it. Or you can have a fold pivot down antenna, which normally that one that you see in the picture here is about 32 feet high. You bring it up when you are going to operate, you take it down when you're not operating. It can be hidden behind a fence or wherever. And then on the next chart's my favorite, it's the flower pot antenna. This was designed quite some time ago. It's basically some PVC and coax to make an antenna, and it's designed to be stuck in a flower pot and then decorated so you can put it on a front porch. So if you're in an apartment complex or a condominium or a townhouse, maybe this is an option as a radio antenna for you. Next chart. And am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Benefits, if we just go to the next one. Yeah, Christmas tree lights can be used. Next chart. Benefits. Previous speaker talked about Aries and that support. Loudoun County, we have a amateur radio station at the Loudoun County Center, which is brought up in case of emergency, and we hams in the community support that. Also, the National Weather Service at Dulles has a ham station, and as part of the Skywarn program, we're able to call weather reports and actually get that up and running, and directly to the meteorologist. So finally, ham radio operators will improvise on the next chart, adapt and overcome. And while I'd like the freedom to install the big antennas, I know what the constraints are, and I know that it's important for every community to be able to make its own decisions and come to its own agreements on what can and cannot be used. And with that, sir, I thank you. If you have any questions.
Very good. And so thank you. Does anybody have any immediate questions for Mr. Radloff before we go to our final one? And I guess I'll ask the obvious question. These are all workarounds that I guess if a neighbor noticed, they could still tell you or report you, and you'd have to go ahead and remove the lights from around the palm tree so anyways, all still technically violating the declaration, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Technically violating, but then again, if it's just a wire like this right here, how many people are going to see it wrapped around the tree unless they get real up close? You're not going to see it from the street. And the other part is, as part of, as we look at our covenants within our community, does it really detract from the resale values or the amenities of the community?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Delegate Marshall.
Yes, technology-wise, the Pennsylvania County Sheriff's Department used to have a huge tower at their facility. But now they have towers all over Pennsylvania County, and the signal goes from dispatch through broadband to those towers. Is that technology the same? Could ham radio use the broadband to go to the outside tower to broadcast and receive?
Ham radio operators or clubs and organizations have put antennas up on like police towers. I know one of our antennas in Leesburg is connected to a tower at a water treatment facility out in Purcellville, and actually connects to a tower. So there is some technology that would allow us to do that, yes. The question is whether or not those owners of the towers would allow us to put antennas up there or not for liability and safety reasons and things of that nature. But the technology could be used that way, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Trigiani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Pia Trigiani, practicing lawyer representing primarily common interest community associations, but my path to this practice started as a regulatory official for the Virginia Real Estate Commission in the 80s, and I've done developer work over my time and have tried to stay current with the laws that apply to common interest communities. I appreciate the value of ham radio operators and the services they provide, but I don't mean to go all legal on you, but I'm going to. It's a constitutional issue. The reason that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 can do what it's done is that it's a federal law. Federal law preempts state law and covenants and restrictions. It's that simple. When the Telecommunications Act of 1996 was put in place, now, wow, almost is that 30 years? I never get counting right. 30 years ago, and the regulations that were adopted by the Federal Communications Commission followed it, they absolutely rejected at that time, including regulations that addressed ham radio operations in antenna. So it is not addressed in federal law. Therefore, it cannot, we can't just hang on to what the Telecom Act says about allowing and preempting covenants and restrictions and local ordinance. The bill, as it was introduced and even amended, applies not only to property owners associations, but to condominium communities and real estate cooperatives. That's a problem, because the common elements of a condominium are owned by individual owners. There is no real place, and it's a challenge, and was a challenge with the Telecom Act of 1996, where you can put these antenna, or the 18-inch dishes. That's what the Telecom Act of 1996 did. Basically said, you can't say no to an 18-inch dish. The big old ugly dishes, the buds, as they call them, are not permitted, 18-inch and smaller. They could be placed on a limited common element balcony, but they had to be secured in some way. They can't be secured to the exterior wall because that's common element. So there's a challenge with the scope and breadth of House Bill 2542. As drafted, it cannot apply or should not be applied or would be unconstitutionally applied to condominiums and co-ops. Restrictions on use are restrictions for all. And I'm going to say that because it is important to understand. It's not to say no to someone. That's oftentimes how restrictive covenants are viewed. They're viewed as, you're telling me I can't do something on my private property. Well, yes, but we're doing that because your next door neighbor, who also purchased in this community, expects that they too will not. They have an expectation that an installation, and again, not to pick on an antenna, that installation will not be made on that neighboring property, or on the common elements, or on the common area. There's an expectation issue when someone purchases a home that they are going to be protected to some extent from their neighbor. And I will tell you, I just was talking to a manager yesterday who was decrying the fact that neighbors don't want to talk to neighbors, they want us to be the bad guy. So that's how community associations often find themselves in that role. Communities should have the freedom to decide what they want to be. I'm not saying that what may work in one community may not work in another. The alternatives that Mr. Radloff shared are great alternatives that don't impact and can be part of a reasonable covenant application process. But the Telecom Act of 1996 did away with any application. People can put a dish wherever they want to put a dish on their house. They can ultimately, on the back side, the association can say, is that still in use, or can you give us a post-installation application? But the Telecom Act of 1996 was really designed to create a level playing field between dish operators and cable people, the cable operators. It was to create an opportunity that dish people were being disenfranchised by the cable people. So it was to even the playing field. And this is a different situation and circumstances. On the slides, I'd like to just give you some facts in closing about community associations. First of all, in Virginia, and I think Mr. Hofstadter or Delegate Siebold may have said it, over 2 million Virginians live in common interest community associations. And that's 9,100 communities. I think that number's low. I think there are more. And I think a lot of them don't even know they're in one sometimes. So that's the case. It is a $4 billion industry. It takes that much to maintain community associations throughout the Commonwealth. It's the example of a perfect public-private partnership. Community associations exist. Condos and co-ops a little different. But HOAs exist because they take burdens off our local governments. They provide municipal services traditionally provided by a community, by a government, that are now provided by their association. Perfect example, trash removal. I live in a community in Old Town Alexandria. I moved five blocks over, and all of a sudden I'm now paying for my trash removal. Before that, the city took care of it. It takes burdens off of localities. We have a lot of these communities are volunteer-led, like Mr. Radloff, who's, as he described, put a lot of time into his community, valued at over $100 million in volunteer time a year. And it's important to know that in the world of homeowners association or community associations, almost 60% are considered homeowners associations, 35 to 40 are condominiums, and then the smaller number are real estate cooperatives. We can go to the next slide, which shows some data that we pulled from the internet, which shows that in 2023, 70 American Radio Relay League affiliated clubs in Virginia, 5,500 are ARRL members, and a net growth of 350 licensed ham radios in 2023. But when you balance that against the number that have let their licenses expired, you're in a minus. 500 people let their license expire. So you're reducing the number of ham radio operators is declining. And also on the next slide, you'll see that some data on ham radio use in Virginia, it is limited. The national trend is that ham radio use is declining. Minnesota Ham Radio reports that the number of licensed ham radios dropped from 10,000 in 2022 to 14,000, and much of that is licenses. That's the entry-level license. And by comparison, the number of licensed ham radios increased by 7,800 in 2020 and 7,252 in 2021, which was in the middle of the pandemic, I would say. Okay, and so there has been a decline. I would suggest and go back to the point that while it's an important service, and I recognize that, it is important for communities to have the ability to decide how they want their communities to look and feel. That's the architectural review process. And it's not about the one, it's about the all. And we need to allow the all to have a voice in how their communities will look, appear, and be operated. Thank you, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trigiani. All right, at this point, we've heard all the presentations on this particular topic. Would love thoughts or comments or questions from members of the work group. Let's see, Senator Hashmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify from the presentation from Mr. Radloff, it seemed, Mr. Radloff, you pointed out that there is decreased capacity sometimes with the alternative measures that you have installed in using your ham radio, but those that decreased capacity is not prohibitive. It doesn't prevent you from doing what you need to do, basically. Am I correct then?
And if our speakers, you need to use the mic so that the people on the live stream and Delegate Seabold and if you guys could come up here too.
Yes, ma'am, your analysis is correct. It's not the optimum solution. No, it's a workaround.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I recognize that there are ways to operate that are less than ideal, as my counterpart has exemplified. But there are times when you need it to work, and you need it to work well. And that's why I talked about outdoor antennas and elevation and rotators, because when atmospheric conditions, when you want to talk far and atmospheric conditions are not right, we refer to this as propagation. You sometimes need that advantage. You need that height, you need that antenna outside, and if you have to make that contact with someone else at, say, 70 degrees east, having that equipment that can rotate your antenna increases that probability that you will make that vital contact. And if we're talking about potential life or death situations, I would offer that you want the best that you can have.
All right, thank you. I did have a question. Maybe this is for Delegate Siebold. I think in your bill, as Ms. Trigiani mentioned, is that it covered both single-family residential properties and HOAs as well as properties that have common elements. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit? Because I think in my mind, I can see a differentiation between something in your own yard versus using a common element which is owned by everybody. And so in that way, you're kind of trespassing on everybody's common property by affixing an antenna. But can you speak to how wedded you are to addressing both at the same time, or just provide your thoughts?
Mr. Chair, if I can remember back a few months ago, I believe we spoke with DLS, and we were willing at some point to remove that segment for apartment buildings or condo buildings. But there was something legal, if I remember, again, I'm not an attorney, but it was something, some wording that DLS recommended to keep that language in because it would somehow prohibit the single-family homes also from not being able to follow the covenants.
Okay, and maybe Ms. Trigiani can help me out, but since we have a Property Owners Association Act and a Condo Act, and I know we try to keep them in sync as much as possible, is there anything legally that would prevent us from dealing with the POA and leaving the Condo Act alone?
No, Mr. Chairman, there's not.
Okay.
You can amend one statute and not the others, but the bill as it's drafted does specifically address being able to install antennas on the roof and the side, which you don't want folks up on the roof of a condominium because of the maintenance issues, among others, but anyway.
All right, thank you. Delegate Coiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we saw a lot of photos of hidden antennas. There's nothing preventing someone from applying today to their architectural review committee in their neighborhood and requesting an antenna on their property. Is that correct? There's nothing that prevents you by law from going before your HOA and requesting this?
I mean, as I alluded to earlier, my covenants for my HOA completely prohibit any type of antennas except TV antennas. So if I were to even raise this question, it would automatically be put down. The architecture committee would remind me of the covenants and explain that they would not offer any leniency or carve out for me, even if I were to ask and tell them, I just want to put a wire, no one's going to see it from the street, my backyard neighbor is not going to see it, they would still tell me no. So I can't speak about all the HOAs in the entire state, but very, very strict where I live.
Comments at some point, but.
Delegate Coiner.
If I can address that too, real quick.
Yes, sir.
Our HOA covenants and declarations specifically state only receive antennas, no transmit antennas, and no ham radio antennas.
Thank you. Comments, Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Coiner.
So I guess my point, there's no law that prevents it, but what's preventing it in your specific situation is that you've bought a piece of property in a neighborhood that has rules and regulations that are legally restricting the property. And, you know, one of the things as an attorney who practices in this area, I often have to tell people, you know, there's a few pathways when we run into these HOA where you don't agree with something. I tell people, one, you can run for the board, and then you can try to make changes to your covenants. Two, you can run to be on the architectural review committee and influence, if it's not completely prohibited, how they are permitted. Or three, we choose where we live. You choose to live in a neighborhood that allows you to do your hobby or the activity that you want to do. You know, in my particular neighborhood, there are restrictive covenants that say you cannot do anything to the exterior of your house or your property without going through the architectural review committee. My hobby is gardening. I can't plant things in my yard without submitting an application. Is it a burden for my hobby? Yes, it is. Would I have moved into the neighborhood if it said you can never plant any of your own flowers? The neighborhood down the street from me, they have that restriction because they pay for a landscaper to take care of everybody's outdoor landscaping. And because of that, they are prohibited from adding anything to their yards. But it's a choice that they made to live in that section. And because of my hobby, I chose not to. So, my concern is, in a lot of ways, we do have a federal law that manages satellites and other things. I don't think it's a place for the state to be involved, and the Christmas tree effect that we have. I like gardening is the next thing that we look at is interfering with contracts, because your restrictive covenants are a contract. You are going into a contract with everyone else in your neighborhood that even though there are things you may like to do, contractually you've all agreed it's better for the value of a whole to abide by certain rules together. So I continue to struggle in these areas where we do have private contracts and private negotiations and then asking after the fact for the state to interfere. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Delegate Coiner. I just had one last question, and if we don't have anybody else, we'll move on to the next topic. So I know that we have the federal law, and so the federal law preempts certain actions with respect to declarations and then leaves it up to the states to deal with something like amateur radio. I guess my question is, have any other states adopted legislation similar to what Delegate Siebold is presenting here? Just trying to get a sense of, again, the national landscape, or are we truly cutting new turf here?
Marshall has a question.
Okay.
No, Virginia would be on the forefront of this passage.
Okay. All right, that's a simple answer. Thank you. Delegate Marshall, you have a question.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
You're good? Okay. Anyways, thank you very much for all the presentations. That gives us a lot of information to chew on. I guess Delegate Siebold, what I would suggest is that based on the feedback that you've received and some of the questions, is if you want to work with stakeholders that are interested in this particular topic, see if there's any areas of commonality. And then at our next meeting, we would like to invite you back to be able to provide a report of where we are and whether there's any opportunity for consensus in terms of the whole thing or even different pieces of the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very, very much. Our next conversation deals with declarant control of residential development and the process for transitioning control to lot owners. This is quite honestly an issue that I thought there was more state law regarding, and I was promptly corrected that there isn't as much state law. This is a particular case from the Eastern Shore. I did want to mention specifically that Senator DeSteph and Delegate Bloxham have all weighed in on this and are very concerned about the particular situation on the Eastern Shore, but also just with respect to the law in general. And so again, this is an opportunity for us to hear about a particular issue or situation, but I do believe it has statewide applications or implications. But I had asked Director Pollen if she could go ahead and set the stage in terms of the existing law as it exists today, so that we all are on a level playing field.
We have two good and thorough speakers and work group members with expertise in this group, but I thought I'd quickly give you all an overview of the issues we're addressing today. First and foremost, the declarant is just another way of saying developer in today's context. A developer who's building a community has a great financial interest in selling all the lots. He appoints a board to take up the association issues. In the majority of cases, the declarant resigns and a new board is elected, and he relinquishes control of records and the organization's books. There is currently no law in Virginia that addresses how long before a declarant departs. That is, the period of declarant control ends. Although when dealing with condominiums, Virginia law differs. Today, we're talking about property owners associations. Most of the time, when the units are sold or specific timeframes established has been met, the declarant steps down. Of course, there are exceptions, and that is what we're dealing with today. Some other states have timeframes established by law which mandate the declarant to step down. And once again, that's after a specific number of sales or a specific time frame. Both Delaware and Pennsylvania have versions of this model, which is a tiered step down. Virginia does not yet have that model. I hope this provides just a little bit of background, and now our speakers can begin.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Pollen. And so first up, and hopefully I'm having the last name correct, Teresa Burkhead, who is a resident at Captain's Grove. And so welcome to the work group. The podium is yours.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Teresa Burkhead, and I am a resident in Captain's Cove. I've been selected by the members of our community to be the speaker today, and I appreciate you allowing us to speak. Captain's Cove Golf and Yacht Club is advertised as a resort community, but it's fallen short of its promises to live the resort life. Our members love the community neighbors, our access to the Chincoteague Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean. We are socially connected to each other due to our common interest of outdoor active living. However, we want to change the one element of the community that stresses us, and that is the declarant control of our community funds, decisions, and property rights. For the last 13 years, our current declarant, CCG Note LLC, and their associate, Tim Hearn, have controlled our community and have changed its dynamics. There is no respect for the Class A members, which in turn has created an atmosphere which the disrespect is now mutual. The next slide, please. Oh, I have it. Okay, thank you. And I'm hitting the red or the, oh, next. Okay, gotcha. This is an excerpt from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Property Report dated May 21st, 1975. The initial declarant, First Charter Land Corporation, had sold 4,214 lots, with only 663 lots unsold. They transferred control and many of the platted common areas to the association. Calvin Burns went to the courthouse to record the transfer of the roads and signed as himself the declarant, to himself the president of the association. No one from the county inspected the roads to see if they actually existed. Some were built, but many of the platted streets were not. Some areas were cleared only as paths. Paved roads were not built to be 20 feet wide as per the deeded plats. By the year 2000, members started questioning the declarant's plans to complete the community. Some retained attorneys and found that the litigation process was way too costly. And it was easier and cheaper to sell their lots or simply just walk away from them when they couldn't sell them. By 2004, another developer bought out First Charter Land. The association agreed to assign Captain's Cove Group, LLC, the new declarant of Captain's Cove. This succeeding declarant continued to develop the subdivision with the construction of the roads, water, and sewer services, replacing the yacht club and the front entrance signage, which you see up on your screen, in exchange for declarant status and privileges. The Class A members continued to control the association and their funds. They utilize member volunteers and committees to manage the activities and upkeep of the common areas. They hire very few full-time employees and seasonal part-time employees for the year-round responsibility because themselves as volunteers are doing the work. The declarant wanted to replace the small, older marina club that was down by the water, but the members refused to go further in depth and be forced to raise the annual dues. He then, the declarant, offered to replace, design, and pay for a new marina club with no cost to the members. He shared that he could bring in more buyers with a more modern clubhouse. It started off being a 2-story design, but the declarant changed the design to a 1-story building with a larger imprint onto his land that was platted for townhomes. He shared that the land in that platted area would not be able to house townhomes and that parking anyway, so he would use that area for a larger clubhouse and parking lot. The entire project was controlled by the declarant. The project was completed in 2009, and it opened in time for a New Year's celebration. Everybody was happy. Well, just for a little while. Just until the bank called the developer's loan, and he could not find another bank to cover it. Tim Hearn owned a part-time house in the Cove at the time and convinced his real estate associates to buy out the assets of the Declarant. The group is known as CCG Note LLC. Even before they were designated as succeeding declarant, his counsel, Mark Baumgartner, sent a notice to the association to quit, vacate, and surrender possession of the Marina Club building. A notice of a special meeting of members was posted in the Eastern Shore Post with intent to remove the current board of directors. The association's attorney, Michael Emmons, sent a letter to Baumgartner to put them on notice that this was considered a hostile takeover of an association. CCG Note sued the association for not allowing them to run for the board of directors. The board of directors determined that they were not eligible because they were past due on assessments for many lots. In turn, the association countersued. In January of 2012, the board of directors met in a special meeting with the members of CCG Note and their associate Tim Hearn and created a settlement agreement. There was no member notice or member vote when they signed the agreement that gave back several common areas of the community, including commercial areas, 2 front entrance sign lots, and the maintenance area to the declarant. The board of directors agreed to pay a declarant self-finance loan of $3 million with 6% interest only for 10 years, with a balloon payment at the end of this term. The amount alone paid for the investment expense for the declarant to purchase the assets of the previous declarant. A few years later, the declarant and Tim Hearn sell off the water and sewage facilities, residential lots, and part of the community's platted common areas for a future 9-hole golf course without a member notice or a member vote for another $3 million. Here we are, 51 years later, after the transfer of declarant control, and our community members and association collectively own 3,697 lots. Our community members have been running their association from 1974 to 2013. That means for 39 years, our community was successful in managing their own common areas, funds, social welfare activities, and the board of directors. There was a separation of the developer, AKA declarant, and the association. The bankruptcy of a declarant should not affect the operations of the association after a declarant control has been transferred to the members. Today, there are over 500 property owners who are behind in their dues. When reaching out to all of the members during this last election, we found that over 200 of them are deceased for up to 20 years, by the way. Our budget is created based on all of us paying our dues, even these people who are dead. But then the association writes off the bad debt every year. We are continuously informed that we have to pay higher dues because of those who do not pay their dues. Dead people can't pay dues. Mind you that lot owners past due on their assessments are not allowed to vote. In addition, the attorney who handles our lot foreclosures for past due assessments is also the attorney for the declarant. Folks, with my background, I can tell you with a great number of confidence that there's a lot of conflict of interest here. No one I know with subdivision codes and ordinances, this community should have come into compliance with Chapter 23, the Subdivided Land Sales Act, on July 1st, 1978. The declarant was still selling lots with land sales contracts. 20 years later, they still weren't following that act. Now, here we are today being told that our community is grandfathered in and none of the subdivision ordinances of the codes of Virginia apply to us. How can that be? In Virginia, developers develop, not the buyers of lots in a subdivision, not unless that's how the community was set up and the people agreed to do that. Most municipalities do not exempt older subdivisions from the whole entire local subdivision code, but Accomack County does. Since 2012, the declarant has controlled, let's see, we go the wrong way here. That's the special meeting of the members, I'm sorry. All right, the next page. Since 2012, the declarant has controlled almost every aspect of this community without having to be responsible to be a declarant. They have not been responsible for building roads or the utility infrastructure. Instead, they decided to use our dues to do that. Our roads have had minimum repairs or thinly dispersed chip and tar. After questioning them to why platted road areas were listed on the road improvement plan as needed resurfacing when there were no roads there, they claimed it's because the association owns those areas, therefore it must pave the roads. When asked why funds for road maintenance and repairs were utilized to build roads, they claim they are only improving the roads. Well, in all my years as a Virginia, and yes, a female, being a Virginia licensed Class A contractor since the 80s, I have never heard of improving a road until after it's built. In Virginia, the declarant, AKA the developer, is responsible to do so. Since the 70s, the code for these types of subdivision required the declarant to be financially responsible for building the infrastructure of the roads and utilities, even after transferring the platted common areas. Our initial declarant had to complete HUD and Army Corps of Engineer property reports, record the deeds and the plats and the governing documents. That's what was required back then when he went to the county in 1969. All of those documents address the declarants and association responsibilities, and they're pretty much in sync to what code is today. The association is doomed to fail if it has to bear the financial burden to build roads and the utility infrastructure and repair them simultaneously. This is a tragic situation and a great injustice to these folks. None of them sign any document that requires them to be the developer. As a licensed contractor and a retired employee from the Commonwealth of Virginia that has built houses in the Tidewater area, I'm telling you, it cannot be done. These people cannot afford to be the developer and to repair their roads. Many of the community's homes are considered to be affordable. Most have house payments under $1,000. That's pretty affordable in today's world. Their dues are close to $2,000 to $2,300 a year. That's 2 of their house payments. These folks deserve to live and keep their modest homes. If the declarant would be held accountable to be the developer and the community be able to run their association again, their dues would be greatly reduced. None of us signed any papers that said we would take on the responsibility of a declarant. Why would we even need a declarant and give them the benefits but not the responsibilities? That doesn't even make sense.
And ma'am, if I could ask, because we are going to run out of time with our 2-hour block, so if you can move through the rest of your presentation.
Okay, you can tell I'm passionate about this.
And I appreciate that very, very much.
So this one here, even the morale, I'll try to sum it up, even the morale of our community is squashed by this developer. This is an email that we received after we went to a public hearing trying to tell the county that we were against an affordable townhome project that was going to use our main road, $500,000 of our dues, and 10 lots in our community, and go against the design of the community by adding in another entrance. Right away, we were given this email saying that we were removed of being chairpersons of our community committees. This next excerpt is from a article that they use. They use this paper up in Ocean City, Maryland, the Cove Currents. If you speak out against the developer, your name's going to be in the paper. Well, for the last, I can't remember how many years, about 15, 20 years, I worked for the Department of Corrections and Correctional Education. Inmates have called me all kinds of things, so I'm used to my name being in the paper and on a piece of paper. I didn't care what he said about me. I was going to uphold the law. I spoke the truth when I went on the witness stand against, they had put a restraining order against one of our members, and I was there and I witnessed it. I went to court. We were all there separately. The witnesses were there separately. We spoke our piece. The judge looked at the video, and my name still comes out in the paper looking like this, that, you know, I'm a disgrace of not supporting women. I don't support any woman who lies, and I don't care if who they're lying against. But I actually spoke what I saw. The next one, before I finish, and I'm almost done. Our community members living on the water are required to protect their lots from coastal erosion and encroachment onto our adjacent neighbors' lots. But the declarant doesn't protect his lots. These are photos of the properties owned by the declarant in 2 opposite areas of our community. That's the Chincoteague Bay, by the way. In the Army Corps of Engineer property report, there are detailed drawings and specifications to lots on the water to be protected by a bulkhead. All of us are required to bulkhead or riprap our waterfront properties. The Board of Directors have also voted to use our dues to bulkhead association lots obtained by foreclosures or attained by declarant swaps. Again, the community cannot sustain the self-serving decisions made by the declarant and the boards of directors he single-handedly elected. We desperately need an intervention in the Commonwealth. We need laws put in place to prevent this from happening, not only to us, but to other older subdivisions who have been displaced with grandfather terminology. We are aware that we live in a buyer beware state, but we know that a legislative intent was not for Virginia to be a buyer gets screwed state. You should have in front of you two handouts, one that is a short list of many of our declarant controlled issues, and I know it's a long list. They should be in front of you, but I narrowed it down just to the most important issues that we have. We also have another handout there for recommendations of legislative change for our state. Even if it doesn't affect us, we don't want to see another community get walked on like we have. We'd seriously like for you to look at our issues and our situation and create a fair solution to those communities that have been overlooked and pushed from legal oversight. Please look at how transition codes and ordinances can be implemented while protecting member property rights, as well as the developer rights. I've built houses. I want to be protected too when I'm putting my money and my labor into it. I thank you for allowing Captain's Cove to be represented here today. My neighbors present today and listening with live streaming are into the hundreds, not thousands today. We have had over 1,600 members financially support our 400,000 plus litigation over the last 3 years, including realtors, brokers, and builders on the Eastern Shore who are ready for Captain's Cove to complete the development for their clients and potential clients. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony, and I appreciate the specificity in terms of your matrix. It's helpful for us to kind of understand the backstory about where you are. Of course, not the role of the Housing Commission, with respect to litigating the issues. That's for the courts. That said, our purview is the state law that sets the foundation for how these declarations are set up. And to your point, what can we do to make sure that we're mitigating for future communities being in a similar situation? And then Delegate Coiner also raised a good point, which is there's process and procedure both within the courts and the local governments to make sure that at least the issues are resolved in as fast a manner as possible. Anybody have any specific questions or comments? Yeah, we do have another presenter. Okay, why don't we have our next presenter? So our next presenter is Mark Baumgartner with Pender and Coward. Welcome, thank you.
Chairman Bulova, members of the work group, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today, and I thank you for making the time and attention to it. Again, my name is Mark Baumgartner, and I'm here on behalf of CCG Note LLC. I am not going to address point for point all of the things that the former speaker said. That's not the role of this That's not the role of this work group. There's courts for that. The ombudsman has done a very good job of handling complaints that come out of the neighborhood, and that's their role. My role today is to share with you a little bit about the history of Captain's Cove, what brought us where we are today, and some of the unique challenges that it's faced. My practice involves real estate law. I work primarily on the developer and declarant side, probably more often, but I also represent associations, and I specifically have represented associations when declarants overstep their bounds or overstay their welcome. So I am familiar with the issue from both sides. This community is maybe not completely unique in Virginia. It is fairly unique in my experience, and it is fairly unusual. For those of you, let's see, right? Yeah. This is a fairly blurry photograph of a diagram of the association. Again, it's 4,800 lots. It is a very large community. It was first platted in 1969. At the time that it was platted, the subdivision ordinance did not require paved roads. It did not require a lot of the infrastructure improvements that today's law requires. As of 2000, the only roads that were paved in this subdivision were the main road that you can sort of see. There's a larger road that's a U shape that runs through the community. That was paved, and then primarily the waterfront lots. So the waterfront lots were very popular. Those had houses on them. But the rest of the community was largely, many of the lots had been purchased from the original developer on agreements of sale that were subsequently defaulted, and the developer got them back. So as of 2000, the developer held approximately 2,000 of the 2,800 lots, or 4,800 lots in the community were held by the First Declarant, First Charter Land. First Charter Land had been in this Captain's Cove community since 1969. Mr. Burns was getting on in years, and he was not putting the energy into this community anymore. That part was clear. And so you had, at that time, approximately 300 to 400 houses in a 4,800 unit development. Very few roads were paved, and significantly, it had a private water and private wastewater facility to provide sewer for lots that could not perk and water for lots from wells. This was a small public utility, privately owned public utility regulated by the State Corporation Commission. There's a critical mass necessary to run a public utility, and 300 to 400 houses is not it. And the wastewater treatment facility was severely in need of improvements. In 2004, Captain's Cove Group acquired the interests of the First Declarant and started to do some infrastructure improvements and put money into the wastewater treatment facility. It's important to note that the actual control of the association was transitioned in the 70s. So while the Declarant had voting rights and has super priority, has 3 voting rights for every lot that the Declarant owns, the actual board, and even to this day, the board is comprised of 8 members, one of whom is an alternate and does not normally vote. Of those 7 members, 4 are members of the community and 3 are representatives of the Declarant. So the board itself is actually controlled by the community. And although the Declarant has 3-to-1 voting rights, those voting rights have never, to my knowledge, have never changed the results of any election. So while the votes are there and they are important for the control, they have never been actually exercised for the purposes of changing an election. As was mentioned, the substitute Declarant, Captain's Cove Group, took over in sort of the boom years, 2004 to 2008. Yes? Yes. In that time period, of course, 2008, the bottom fell out of the real estate market. Even though the developer was making his payments on the note, the bank got nervous, called the note due, and the developer went bankrupt. Now, here's what happened. At that point in time, the developer stopped providing additional funds to the wastewater treatment facility. Didn't have the money, couldn't do it, was in bankruptcy. At the time, there were about 500 homes there. Not enough funds, unless you really jacked up the rates, there's not enough funds there to run the utility. The electric company was going to turn off the electricity. The operator of the wastewater facility said, well, if you're going to turn off the electricity, we're going to shut down. Turns out you're not allowed to turn off the electricity to a wastewater facility, and you're not allowed to stop operating a wastewater facility that's regulated by the State Corporation Commission. So the State Corporation Commission issued an order that said you will continue to operate this facility. Doesn't matter that you don't have the money to do it, you got to find it, you got to continue operating. And that's when CCG Note came in and developed a strategy to help the community build itself to a point where it could be sustained. And it needed to have infrastructure in order to support the wastewater facility and in order to gain more lots. Just putting up a chart here. In 2012, there were 800 homes. That's 300 homes built since 2004. And there were 1,700 dues-paying lots. Now, another unique thing about this subdivision is, I don't know if kids play jacks anymore, but if you took a handful of jacks and threw them across the map, that's the developer lots. So they're not in a section, it's not like the developer owns undeveloped section A and section B is sold. All of the lots throughout the whole subdivision are just scattered, individuals and Declarant. And so the strategy was to take lots that where dues aren't being paid, foreclose on those lots, trade people for lots that are on developed areas so that they could increase the dues payers. And today, if you look at 2025, there's 2,900 dues paying members. There's 1,300 homes. There's 26 miles of paved roads. And the association budget is far stronger than it was in 2004, 2012. So it's a long process, but without the ability to have Declarant control, and again, up to this point, it has been the persuasion of the Declarant with the community members that are on the board to work together toward a solution. But without that ability to control, no developer would have touched this. No developer would have gone into this 4,800 unit subdivision and finished it. So for those reasons, as you consider what Declarant control means, think about situations and what would happen if someone did not have an incentive to go in and help rebuild an area, because this wastewater treatment facility would not have survived with 500 lots. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Who's the developer now?
It's CCG Note LLC.
Same folks? And what's the plan for the next 2, 5, 10 years? I mean, I heard a lot of history from the 60s and then 70s, and then it kind of spaced out. I mean, most subdivisions, and I live in Henrico, when a project stalls out, the county usually intervenes or tries to assist that developer, whether it's finding a buyer, maybe that would help, or trying to do something to get you all out of this rut. I'm just trying to figure out where does it stand now and what's the future hold for this?
Yeah, I'm glad to address that. First of all, the utility, what they did was they built up the utility to the point where it was a sustaining utility, and they sold it to Aqua Virginia. Aqua Virginia runs a lot of facilities throughout the state. They're a very experienced operator, and quite frankly, getting them to the table to acquire this was a major coup. I mean, it was a significant issue. And that's why the developer, in order to get that done, deeded over some of his land for future rapid infiltration basins for the disposal area. So they deeded over that area. Okay. If you look at the map on the wall there, the area that is to the right, sort of around that one square, that area is a lot of wetlands. The development challenges in that area are extreme. And so one of the strategies that the association has undertaken is, if you are a homeowner and you own a lot in one of those sections and you're current on your dues, they'll swap out that lot and they'll say, look, give us the deed to your lot where you can't build, and we'll give you a deed to a lot over here where you can build. And so the areas on the other side, that's where the roads have been paved, infrastructure has been put in place, and the association is swapping lots. They're also working with national builders, and there's several times national builders have come in, purchased bunches of lots, and we're still working on that.
So I guess sorry if I could.
Yeah, Mr. Clark.
When did that process start of the national builders coming in? And clearly this is swapping lots sounds like extremely messy. I'm not even sure how you would do that. Somebody else needs this, in my opinion, step in. I mean, this seems like a pretty dire emergency. So when did national builders come in? Do you have a plan? Are they buying up lots? Are people interested? I just want to kind of know what the reality is instead of the plan, like where things stand and what the realistic expectation is of taking this place out of the hole.
And again, I know the lot swap sounds messy, but the fact is, if somebody owns an unbuildable lot in a section and can trade that for a buildable lot, they're more likely to pay dues, ultimately build a house there, and the number of dues-paying homeowners has gone up over the past 10 years, demonstrates the success of that effort. The second thing that we're doing, again, there was a national builder that went under contract in the 2012 timeframe and pulled out. Oh, yeah. We have another builder that is looking currently at acquiring lots. There's another area that is on the waterfront on the east side, and that is severely eroded, and it's got some wetlands issues. but they're prime lots because they face the water, they're waterfront lots, and there are active steps being taken right now to work with the Corps of Engineers to get authority to build on those lots. Again, high-profile lots, and the association owns many of those lots, and those lots will sell for a significant amount of money once they're sold. And those are owned by the association, which will add to their revenue.
That's gonna take a while,
Yeah.
working with the Corps of Engineers.
All right. Well,
You could sell some of it to generate
here's what I'm going to do, because this issue clearly has a very long history. I think most of the current issues, again, are things that are much better dealt with either at the local level and or in the court system. What I am very interested in, again, is our state laws with respect to declarant control. And I am interested, with respect to Delegate Coyner's point, with respect to processes and procedures, both at the court and the local level. What I'm going to ask at this point, without objection, is that maybe we can get a small group together. I'm going to throw out some suggestions, and if we have anybody who wants to strenuously object, they can let me know, or if they want to join on that as well. But I think we need somebody from VML and or VACO to join the group. I think Andrew Clark with the home builders probably needs to be our ringleader for this particular issue.
If they're selling lots, we can get some builders.
And then I'd also like to ask the common industries, sorry, I can't get that word out, Community Association Institute to be also part of that small group. Does anybody else want to volunteer? All right, Delegate Coyner, thank you very much for doing that. And so we do have a starting point for looking at that stuff. I think there are multiple issues here, but I think the best we can do at this point is to step back, digest that, and see what actually falls under the purview of the work group and the Housing Commission and the General Assembly. All right, very good. All right, next up, we have a presentation on the right of first refusal. So this is also an issue that was brought before the 2025 General Assembly session. Oh, is Maldonado here? No, she said she wanted to be last because she's in another one. So this is also an issue that was brought before the 2025 General Assembly session. I know Delegate Elizabeth Bennett Parker had House Bill 1973 that was vetoed by the governor, but the larger issue is when you do have existing affordable housing and the owner decides that they want to get rid of that, potentially for redevelopment, how do you potentially provide a right of first refusal for nonprofit organizations of the local government in order to be able to preserve that? And so Commission staff Jessica Hoff will be providing the presentation. And again, this is just setting the stage. Please take a look at this with an eye towards interest to fleshing out any of these concepts. But I appreciate you helping out today.
Thank you. So as Chair Bulova said, there are more details to come and more discussion to come, and there will be a paper published on the Commission's website that will talk about these slides and what I say in greater detail. I'm just going to touch on the broader points and some interesting takeaways from other states. So in housing policy, a right of first refusal is a contractual right that allows an interested party to purchase housing units under the same terms and conditions an owner would offer to a third party. In the world of affordable housing, right of first refusal policies are typically implemented to help local governments and state agencies acquire housing in order to create affordable units or preserve affordable units. Local governments may require a longer time frame to assemble financing and can have difficulty competing with market rate or luxury developers. So these policies give them an exclusive time period in which to make an offer on the property or the option to match an offer made by a private buyer. Another purchase opportunity policy I'll briefly touch on today is called a right of first opportunity or right of first offer. Here, the owner must still provide notice to those who hold the right, must wait the specified time period before putting the property on the market, but under this one, they are under no obligation to sell. Oh, actually, one slide back. So the details in right of first refusal policies vary greatly, but they generally contain the same basic structure. There is a triggering event, like when the property owner decides to sell, or in several cases, when the property is being converted into market rate housing or the affordability provisions expire. There's a notification, a time frame for exercise, a right to match or exceed, and finally, if the right of first refusal holder, like a local government, declines to exercise their right, then the owner can sell to a third party as normal. So to reiterate, these policies are commonly enacted as a method to preserve or provide a long-term source of affordable housing. Most statewide statutes limit the applicability of this right of first refusal policy to dedicated affordable housing properties. There are also some localities that have expanded this right to include unsubsidized rentals or naturally occurring affordable housing. In some cases, the right of first refusal creates an opportunity to create affordable rental units, and as I mentioned, in others, it preserves the already existing affordable units that contain income restrictions. So many public bodies and state agencies, local governments, have utilized these policies to combat displacement by enabling tenants to remain where they live rather than face eviction. So as you can see on this slide on the left side, many of these policies in some way provide a right of first refusal to other entities besides the local government, including nonprofits, for-profit developers, community development associations, and more. It differs greatly by state. So I'm going to briefly touch on some common concerns that arise during conversations regarding right of first refusal policies. First, it's important to note that there is not much published empirical research documenting the impacts of these policies specifically on the marketability of land. But economic theory and assertions made by parties who have participated in these processes have suggested that they can drive up costs for owners and deter potential buyers from bidding on land in some circumstances. And that is because to comply with the right of first refusal, property owners must spend time and potentially money navigating legal processes and waiting for governments to either exercise their right of first refusal or waive it. So without significant empirical research, it's difficult to fully assess the impact of right of first refusal policies as a potential deterrent on the marketability of these residential properties. However, state and local governments that have enacted these types of policies have reported a lot of success in these programs when it comes to affordable housing. So I'm going to briefly highlight some information gathered from analysis of laws in other states. And again, there's going to be a paper published that provides greater detail if anyone is curious about more of the specifics in these states. So there are 11 states that we found that have right of first refusal policies that apply to affordable housing or housing in general. 8 out of 11 are designed for the purchase of multifamily properties, as I mentioned, that have income restrictions or are federally subsidized and publicly supported. 2 states have passed purchase opportunity policies in addition to the right of first refusal policies. Again, those require notice, but they do not require the owner to sell to whatever party holds the right. So generally, within right of first refusal statutes, the local government or entity with the right can only exercise their right for the purpose of creating or preserving affordable housing, and that affordability must be maintained. New Jersey and Michigan are outliers in the research, so their right of first refusal law in New Jersey applies to a specific set of affordable housing that I think in the 1970s they had a program regarding those units. But their right of first refusal only applies to buying back those units, so it's an outlier in the research, and I won't talk much more about it. And Michigan's statute applies to any tax foreclosed upon property. It does not have to be affordable. Some states have statutes that are triggered not only when affordable housing is being sold, but as I mentioned, also when it's being converted into market rate housing or any action occurs that would terminate the affordability in some way. So most states that provide a right of first refusal to local governments also allow the local government to assign their right of first refusal to a designee such as a qualified for-profit or nonprofit developer. When right of first refusal is assigned, the local governments do not have to temporarily own the property, and this makes it a lot easier on the local government side. The designees, again, must ensure affordability. California and Maryland give the right of first refusal not only to local governments, but also to qualified for-profit, nonprofit developers, and other entities. So there's always a notice provision that requires a property owner to notify the right holder prior to any final sale action, and again, a time period for notice in which the right holder may exercise their right by submitting the offer. Many statutes also require really advance notice prior to any action that, again, would terminate the affordability. Oregon, for example, requires a property owner to provide the state and local government in which the property is located a 2-year notice period before any affordability is terminated. Colorado has the same 2-year notice period. This is because those states wish to track units that might potentially lose their affordability and come up with solutions in that time span. So I'm just going to briefly go over a few states and some highlights found in the research. I'm going to start with Maryland because they're our neighbor and it might be helpful to look at their statutes considering similar properties in the DMV area. Maryland is also notable because 2 localities in Maryland, Montgomery County and Prince William County, have enacted successful right of first refusal policies, and those are very commonly referenced in the research. Statewide, Maryland has a law that requires owners of properties that have been publicly funded or are for tenants that receive Section 8 rental housing assistance to offer the right of first refusal to approved purchasers. After receiving notice, potential purchasers can accept the offer to purchase at fair market value within 120 days after the date of the owner's offer. But the localities in Maryland have actually expanded this policy, and it does not only apply to affordable units, it applies to any units, because their goal is to preserve that naturally occurring affordable housing. In Prince George's County, it applies to units. It applies to buildings with units that contain 20 or more units, or assign the right of first refusal to a third party in that case as well. And in Montgomery County, Maryland, it is 4 units. So anything above 4 units required to give the right of first refusal. The county, Prince William County, George's County, maintains a list of developers, and they reopen that list annually so that more developers who wish to get in on the process can potentially be vetted and allowed in. So like I said, Montgomery County has a similar policy. They received 369 right of first refusal notices from 2015 to 2023 and exercised their right 12 times. Again, it applies to all properties, not just affordable properties, so they get a lot of notices and they don't act on a high percentage of those. In Prince George's County, they received 10 offers of first refusal and went through with purchase 2 times. Massachusetts and Colorado have both enacted right of first refusal policies and also that right of first offer policy that I mentioned before, that again does not require the owner to sell. In Massachusetts, any owner of that publicly assisted housing, so federally subsidized and tenants receive help with rent, and the right of first refusal is actually given to their DHCD. The owner is not under any obligation to sell the property to the DHCD, but if the DHCD and the owner do not reach an agreement to sell, then the right of first offer goes away and that triggers their right of first refusal. So in the 10-year time span, the Massachusetts DHCD used 14 transactions to preserve over 1,600 affordable units by exercising these provisions. 10 out of 14 of these actions actually went through the right of offer process rather than the right of first refusal. And anecdotally, and in a published paper, everyone involved in those transactions much prefers the right of first offer. So Colorado passed their right of refusal statutes just last year, so there's not a lot of evidence on the success yet, but they did it with the goal in mind of preserving over 4,000 units that are set to lose affordability within the next 6 years. So they had a very targeted goal in mind. So their right of first offer applies to properties that are not designated as affordable housing. It applies to multifamily or mixed-use residential properties that are 30 years older or contain 15 to 100 units. The local government's right of first refusal is kind of untraditional compared to other right of first refusals because it functions as an opportunity for the local government to sort of negotiate material terms. And again, the paper expands on that because it's a very complex process, but it's still a right of first refusal. It just leaves a little bit more room for negotiation. So additional interesting provisions in Colorado include a sunset date that actually ends the right of first refusal and right of first offer in 2030. And again, that's because they're targeting those units that are at risk of losing their affordability within the next 6 years. Also, their Attorney General's office is allowed to enforce any violations in these provisions, and the penalty can actually range from $10,000 to $100,000. And that differs from Maine. Their penalty is set at $2,500, and many states do not have a penalty at all. So Texas is a little bit different than the other states here. They grant the right of first refusal to community development organizations to purchase the deed-restricted affordable housing from municipal land bank programs, like the land bank programs we have here in Virginia. This policy was designed specifically to help municipalities meet their specific affordable housing goals, so it can be more tailored to the local government. They also have a law that just encourages developers to offer right of first refusal, and they do that by awarding additional scoring points and applications for low-income housing tax credits. So it's encouraged in that case, but not at all mandatory, but they may be awarded in part based on whether or not the developer has a right of first refusal. So Michigan and Washington include right of first refusal to purchase tax foreclosed property, so that also makes them a bit of outliers in the research. In Michigan, cities, towns, and land banks can exercise their right of first refusal to purchase tax foreclosed properties prior to their conveyance. They must pay fair market value. Detroit has really taken advantage of this law to prevent evictions, but that program is not solely focused on multifamily buildings, so if you'd like to read more on it, again, it'll be in the paper. In Washington, cities may purchase tax foreclosed properties, but this is specifically for the purpose of developing affordable housing, while Michigan just leaves it to any property. A county must give notice to any city in which a tax foreclosed property is located and offer the city the right of first refusal. So just to conclude, several different localities throughout our Commonwealth have identified properties that are at risk of losing their affordability. Virginia may wish to preserve affordable units through a right of first refusal policy that includes or builds upon provisions in other states. There are going to be more details about these programs, again, in the paper that will be published on the Commission's website.
All right, thank you very much. Christy Mara, question or comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I'm just wondering if you have in your research come across, or if you plan on including states that have right of first refusal for manufactured home communities, because I know that there has been conversation about that in other states. There's been conversation and legislation here, and I'm just wondering if you've come across anything.
I have come across it. I focused mostly on multifamily properties that were labeled affordable or that naturally occurring affordable housing. I know Colorado has a bit on for the manufactured process as well, but they separate it out into a different process.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? I guess I did. In your Maryland examples, you threw out the term in addition to the right of first refusal and the other term, fair market value. So do I take it that as long as they were offering fair market value, that the developer had to accept the offer?
Yes, and they have a process for determining fair market value as well.
Okay, is that relatively unique in that I think the other models are that you have the right to provide an offer or right of first refusal, but you always have the opportunity to say, nah, I'd rather not, and then open it up to the world, hoping that you're going to get more than that?
Yeah, it depends on the state. So Rhode Island and a couple other states also focus just on that fair market value component, and they have a specific process and people to determine fair market value. In other cases, it's the owner markets the property first and they receive an offer from a private buyer, and the local government would have to match that offer. So it really depends on the individual statute, but Maryland is the fair market value.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do actually have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I don't remember which state was that is going to sunset in 2030. Was that due to a calculation that basically their rolling off would stop or slow down after 2030, so they were just tackling the bulk of it now and then going back to business normal? That's the idea?
That was the goal that Colorado, and that's what they discussed when they were discussing implementing this bill. So it's to target over 4,000 specific properties, and they were trying to come up with a solution to preserve the affordability of those specific properties, because those provisions expire in at or before 2030. So that 6 years is kind of like a testing period to see if they can specifically, if the legislation really targets that goal. And there's a sunset date, there was talk about waiting and then potentially reenacting the provisions, but it has that 6-year time period because it wants to target specifically those 4,000 units.
Thank you.
And I guess just one last thought. I guess from my own perspective, I'd be a little hesitant with respect to the fair market value. That almost sounds like a condemnation procedure to me, because then you've got to challenge whether that's fair market or not. I do know one of the concerns comes to the amount of time that it takes to go through the process. Time is money when it comes to these kind of issues. Are there any particular states that jump out at you that have a streamlined process so that at least it moves quickly and you remove some of the uncertainty with respect to the owner of the property?
I think Maryland has worked out a pretty tight process, and I have further notes on this. There's another state as well that limits it to like 14 days for the locality to, or the entity to exercise their right. Some have it around 120 days, and that's on the longer end for the right to exercise. And Colorado and Oregon have that 2-year notice provision, but that's not for the right. That is just so they can be aware. And there's a separate notice that kicks in when there's going to be any action taken. So I think there are a lot of states that limit it to around like 60 days, 2 weeks sort of provisions. And I think that those have been published as successful.
Right. Great. Thank you very much for a really nice presentation. I'm sure we'll be diving into that more as we go in. Our last presentation or issue today is the feasibility of establishing manufactured home and subdivision zoning ordinances in Virginia. And so up to present first is Delegate Maldonado. Delegate Maldonado, I know that you are balancing multiple meetings today, so appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I don't have a large presentation for you today, just wanted to share a couple of thoughts as you consider studying this issue. So in Virginia, we don't have a system that holistically tracks and identifies where all of our mobile home communities are. There's no coordinated, cohesive place we can go. So a lot of the improved sort of identification is happening. I am seeing some, but we need something a little bit more coordinated that will help us understand where they are, what we're doing with them, and how we can help support some of the needs there. Having said that, that's just sort of the backdrop of what's happening and what is the inspiration for this request. We have a number of legislative efforts, policy efforts that look at affordable housing, and each and every time our residents who are living in mobile home communities seem to not be covered. An example is in last year we passed a bill that was very simple that brought the fees in the rental agreements up front for transparency purposes. We only did that in the Landlord-Tenant Act. We have a similar act for renters in mobile home communities, and when we tried to pass a similar bill, it got vetoed. I'm seeing this consistency of where this population is not being covered and supported appropriately. So this request is to look at what we can do to help convert this personal property that is the mobile home of these residents into real property. So if you think back to some of the crises we've had in the Commonwealth, we can go back as recently as COVID, when people were getting relief on mortgage payments and things like that. This group did not qualify because their homes are considered personal property and not real property. When you're not a real estate owner, you are left out of a number of resources, benefits, and opportunities. So the request for this study is to look at ways we might be able to adjust, create, change some of the zoning and planning and ordinances to give permission to localities to create mobile home developments. Now, we have lots of mobile home communities. Again, they're not developments. What this would do is if a locality so chose, they could adjust their zoning and ordinances to say that there could be developments, and in that way, folks who own their mobile homes could also own the land underneath the homes. And that gives them the ability to have mortgages and to open them up to other opportunities. The request or the intention is not to make this mandatory. number one. The second is not to require the conversion of existing mobile homes so that people who, companies and organizations that currently own mobile home communities would not be required to convert them. There is none of that. And we also know on parallel tracks, as we just heard a few moments ago, that there's lots of conversation around first rights of refusal that is separate and apart from this. And this is something that can be done independently. So I will pause there, but wanted to give some context as you move into consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Delegate Maldonado. And I think before we open it up for questions, I know we have our two presenters who are also members of the work group, Randy Grumbine from the Manufactured and Modular Housing Association, and Christy Mara with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. And if you'd like to provide your remarks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the work group, and thank you, Delegate Maldonado, for taking on this issue. And I think that Delegate Maldonado really pinpointed the main thing that we're trying to get at here, which is to provide folks a better opportunity, folks who want to live in manufactured homes, because they are the most affordable, unsubsidized avenue toward home ownership that exists in Virginia and really in the entire country. And so I think it's important at this moment when we are seeing such incredibly high median home sales prices. Ms. Palin told us, Director Palin told us at a previous work group meeting today that the median home sales price in Virginia right now is $425,000. And I think that Mr. Grumbine can share an estimate of the median cost or the usual cost of a new manufactured home. It is a fraction of that. But the problem is that first of all, many folks are purchasing these manufactured homes in manufactured home communities, which means, as Delegate Maldonado pointed out, they are treated as chattel. They have to take out much higher interest personal loans for those as opposed to mortgages, and they can't use, they're not building equity because they are treated as personal property. So that's the first issue. On a more sort of day-to-day issue unrelated to finance, because these folks are purchasing things because they can only find manufactured homes in manufactured home communities, and we do have several very nice communities in Northern Virginia in particular, they don't have the same degree of autonomy that most homeowners have, because they are subject to potentially losing their home if the park is sold. So we heard earlier some presentations and conversations about homes subject to homeowners associations, and certainly that limits the autonomy of a homeowner. But this seriously restricts even whether or not they will be able to stay in that home because of the lack of autonomy over the land beneath it. So one way to deal with this as we're talking about this is, do you look at some zoning issues and try to encourage the creation of more mobile manufactured home, and I apologize if I said mobile home, sorry, manufactured home subdivisions. There are some, there's one which I am hopefully someday going to visit and get a tour of, but there's one in particular in Chesterfield County today that I hear is very nice and has been there for quite a while. And so how can we incentivize that, I think, is the question. Probably the biggest thing that I can offer as something for the work group and the commission to chew on in terms of a policy would be clearly stating in the code that localities cannot prohibit manufactured homes, new manufactured homes, from being placed in their locality. We know that in agricultural zones, you can put up a manufactured home by right, but that is not true in residential zones. And then I think the other thing to consider when we want to look at incentivizing the creation of mobile home, manufactured home subdivisions is the concept of minimum lot size and whether or not there's a way for the state to incentivize smaller minimum lot sizes. And again, we're not talking about mandates here. We're just talking about whether or not there can be incentives to enable some use of smaller minimum lot sizes that would encourage the creation of manufactured home subdivisions, which would allow a couple of things, not only manufactured home subdivisions, but subdivisions that would include tiny homes and some other types of stick-built homes that are just on a smaller footprint, therefore increasing the affordability. I think just one other, I think those are the key points actually that I wanted to make. I don't want to take up too much of the work. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. So why don't we have Randy present real quick and then open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy Grumbine, representing the Virginia Manufactured and Modular Housing Association. First, we want to extend thanks to Delegate Maldonado and Christie with the Virginia Poverty Law Center for including us in the conversation and for seeking viable solutions to help achieve more affordable housing options. We do support an all-of-the-above approach. We do support fee simple ownership of manufactured homes. We think there are some benefits to that. The homeowners can build additional equity, and then when they go to sell the home, they have more options, and the second buyer has many more options in a fee simple situation. So we are supportive of that. There's also a benefit to the locality in that fee simple situation because they then can collect property taxes based on the value of the real estate. So for the locality, it's we are paying our own way, which we support that as well. But the uniqueness of the product being the ability to transport also has its purpose in the personal property arena. So for example, if the land is encumbered, but your grandmother can not deed you, but let you place a home on, say, 2 acres of property, that deed does not have to be transferred. We can still place it, and there is loans available for that, as Christy was describing. So they do have a higher interest rate because it is a riskier loan because there's no land tied to that. So we do see the need to still preserve that ability for personal property rights. We are extremely cognizant of the stigma that the industry deservedly gained by the homes that we built in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s when we used inferior material. The homes didn't stand up to the test of time. But the reality is today's homes are built to a whole different standard. The HUD code that regulates us has been constantly improved. And today's energy efficient net zero Energy Star homes stand up with any other kind of construction. So we still have significant education to do. There is a lot of misinformation out there, even among the, I've had a chance to dig into some local codes recently, and it's quite surprising what you see out there in the local jurisdictions regarding their manufactured home language. But the issue that we had with this is not really an issue. We just didn't feel like this was going to be a significant needle mover to expanding this to the subdivision control. Localities already have the ability to do this so if they wish. So that was my comment to the delegate, is we just don't see this being significant to the industry of adding a lot more inventory for affordable homes. So be happy to answer any questions.
All right. I do have one question, and maybe this is for Christy, but Randy, if you want to weigh in. If I think I understand where you were going to as far as a specific policy that we might want to look at, it's not disrupting your current parks, in terms of that bifurcation. That would be tough to do legally anyways. However, I did notice that Florida has a law that I think is what you're kind of getting at, that reads something along the lines of manufactured homes built in compliance with HUD code or under the Florida Manufactured Buildings Act and certified as being compliant with the structural standards of the building code shall be allowed to locate in all residential land use districts. So essentially, you're saying you can't ban these, and if somebody wants to put one of these on a particular piece of property, that way you're able to tie it to the land and use that model. So it's making sure that a locality can't get in the way of that, even if it would be very hard to set up entire new subdivisions for this particular purpose.
Mr. Chairman, exactly. That's exactly right. And I think the real or maybe more immediate benefit of that would be in terms of infill in particularly some of the older neighborhoods in the Commonwealth that do have smaller footprints for their lot sizes, or that may, for example, my home right now, I live in the city of Richmond. My home was built on literally half a city lot, but more than enough room for my 1,600 square foot stick-built home, clearly enough room for a manufactured home. And so what we want to make sure of is if that manufactured home is a choice of the person who purchases that lot, and B, is more affordable for the person who purchases that lot, then we want to make sure that the locality is not doing anything to block that choice.
Okay, thank you. Members have thoughts, additional questions? I guess more importantly, is there, oh, Mr. Garbine.
I could just add to Christie's statement, which is ultimately a home is a home. And we support the ability for the consumer to make that choice.
Right, great. Okay, seeing no other questions, Delegate Maldonado, last word is yours. But I would maybe invite you and your merry band here to take a look at that Florida statute, bring it back so that we can lay eyes on it. And I imagine there will be some comments and questions once they've seen it in black and white, but that sounds like that is probably the best path forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we'll absolutely do that. And also want to say that this is meant to be a flexibility bill, legislation that really gives people options. We saw this session, I think it was 2153 that passed, that gives localities sort of flexibility around figuring out different ways to develop property, but it's focused on nonprofit organizations. And so even though localities have flexibility, we are seeing legislation that's clarifying what is possible and also incentivizing. And that is what we're trying to do, give options, incentivize so people can find pathways up out of poverty and in ways that they currently don't have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Delegate. Okay, we have one last item, that is public comment. We did have some people sign up for public comment. We also had some relatively extensive presentations. If you are still interested in speaking, we are happy to have you. We would ask that you keep your comments short, probably under a minute or so, and if you have similar concerns, you can just say ditto to the person before you. But we're glad that you came over. We understand that this is a long trip, and so really happy that you're here to participate in the process. So Director Pollen, if you want to provide the first name.
We have Lawrence Berger.
Mr. Berger, welcome.
Thank you. I know it's late. I'll try to be short and sweet. My name is Lawrence Berger. I'm a permanent resident of Virginia, only since 2006, living full-time and voting since 2012 at 3265 Blackbeard Road, Captain's Cove at Green Valley, Virginia. I'd like to address a specific item, to agenda item number 4, process of transitioning control to lot owners. I'd like to commend the chair for creating the subgroup to delve into all those other issues that were talked about earlier, and Ms. Palin for the knowledge that other states have addressed this in legislation, and we have not yet. So that said, I concede and stipulate the necessity of the 3-to-1 vote for a developer declarant investing multi-millions of dollars in a community real estate venture. I agree with Mr. Baumgartner on that. I'm sure everybody on the dais would agree with that principle. After all, there would be few, if any, developers, if others than themselves would have initial control over their investment and recouping that investment and making a profit. However, that said, I don't think any objective, reasonable adult would contemplate in any way equitable a 3-to-1 voting advantage permitting practical and complete control by a developer declarant and denying self-government to a community of property owners for more than half a century after its initial incorporation and groundbreaking. Given those existing situations, a prime example being Captain's Cove, I would propose a term limit, that is, a sunset date certain, either by regulation or statute, that could and should be equitable for all stakeholders. What exactly that is, I would leave to your expertise and legal counsel. However, it seems to me somewhere in the vicinity of a decade, give or take, is more than reasonable and just for all parties. If in the legislature's wisdom, this necessary issue is addressed to grant equitable relief to association property owners throughout the Commonwealth, I would further plead that those associations already existing for the period decided and being affected negatively, such as Captain's Cove, be included in said regulation or statute, in effect nullifying the existing inequity. Again, in Captain's Cove instance, this has been bounced around for more than half a century. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in your consideration, focus, and necessary action on this issue. And finally, special notice and kudos to Senator Bilda's staff and Delegate Bloxham for their focus and work on this issue.
Great, thank you very much, sir. All right, next speaker.
Next is Ginny.
Oh, welcome.
It's not as hard as it sounds. Ginny Weslowski, and I'm a full-time resident of Captain's Cove. I'm going to just skip right to the end of my plan blurb, but we have, after 50 years, we're still under the control of a declarant, and sometimes they'll say, well, we turned over that to you, and blah, blah, blah. The problem is defining what it means to turn over control. There may be turning over ownership of roads, but turning over the voting of the election of our board is more critical. I really didn't quite hear what Mr. Baumgartner said, but I think he said something about elections and they don't control the elections or something. But for 13 years, every single board member has been elected by the votes of the declarant. The dues-paying homeowners have never elected successfully a candidate. And because they have control of the board, they control everything. They say how much our dues are, and et cetera. So there are very few options that homeowners have to try to hold them accountable. And most often, we're told to talk to the ombudsman. Every time that I have written to them and communicated with them on 4 different occasions, 4 different issues, I got the exact same response. This is not our jurisdiction. Contact an attorney and take them to court. Well, when we did that, the judge admonished us for not trying other means. What other means? We've asked for help from the Attorney General, and again, been referred to the Ombudsman, and again, been told they don't have jurisdiction. So I would like to see the state of Virginia enact laws that define the length of control and say what that control is and give the power to choose board members to the dues-paying members. And also give the ombudsman more authority, more jurisdiction, or appoint somebody else to do it, but to tell homeowners that they need to hire an attorney and go to court, which is expensive, against some businessmen, companies in Baltimore. These are senior citizens. Most of us are senior citizens on fixed incomes, and it's not reasonable to expect individual homeowners to enforce legally binding documents. It shouldn't be our job. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Next.
Joyce Allman, please.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Would it be appropriate for Mr. Baumgartner to respond to the board situation?
Yeah.
Yeah,
public comment.
yeah, thank you for bringing, but yeah, at this point, it's just public comment time. Yep. Yes, Ms. Almond. And again, realizing the hour, if we can keep the remarks as brief as humanly possible, while also making sure you get your point across.
Yeah, I'm going to go ditto to Ginny's speech, but again, I'm Joyce Almond. I'm a resident of Captain's Cove. I have been since 2009. And again, the past 13 years, the declarant or developer has elected our board. This year, we were so excited to have so many of our Class A members, who are dues-paying members, voted. And we had like over 1,400 votes for the A team, which is 5 members that we had agreed would run for the board. But anyway, they were not elected, none of them. So it was 60% of the Class A members, dues-paying members, voted for this A team, and that none of them made it in. And all of their qualifications, if you would look at their qualifications, were more qualified than many of the people that were voted in. And even, well, anyway, the board decides what our dues are, so it's essentially taxation without representation. And that's about it.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Debbie Katzmiller. And then Butler Newman, and then Kelly Schneider, and then Kathy Puez. If you all want to start gathering yourselves.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished members of the State Housing Commission and guests. I'm Debbie Kitzmiller, and I live in Captain's Cove. Rather than going through my speech that I spent time on, it's almost a ditto, but I did want to add some things that, in preparing, I found. The budget is formulated by the project management team, which is appointed by the board of directors and subsequently approved by the board of directors. At the town hall meeting, it was noted that the BOD president reviews financial summaries, not the detailed ledger. I'm concerned that the community's best interests are not being considered and whether the BOD actually understands these financials. I went back and looked at the voting results for 2022 and 2024 shows the declarant controls the BOD through their votes. Also, seeing there's only one representative here for both the BOD and the declarant makes me think that the declarant controls the board. So the declarant controls our budget and how we manage our funds. So that's why we're all here, hoping that some change can take place. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Butler Newman.
Hi, I'll be brief as well. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts. My name is Butler Newman. My wife and Jill and I have been property owners for 5 years and permanent residents in Captain Cove for 4. My comments are along the lines of the previous speakers. We have lost all trust between the two parties. And anybody who studies leadership at all knows the key element in any successful leadership team is to establish trust in its constituents. We no longer have that. We don't have it because we don't have transparency. We don't have transparency of budget. We get new projects foisted upon us to the tune of $2.5 million potentially with no discussion and a loan that would have to be carried by the community. We have canal owners. I'm one. I pay extra dues to have the canal areas dredged. No dredging in my 5 years. And the solution that was most recently proffered was, why don't we have each canal owner be responsible for dredging their property line just like you mow the grass on your backyard? Well, I hope that was in jest, but I'm not sure that it was, because we would all have to go out and get permits from the Army Corps of Engineers to do that. But this is the kind of thing that has eroded trust. And when you then consider what are our alternatives, is we don't have trust because we don't have accountability of the board. The board functions independent of the community's desires. And we have no ability to change that as long as there's a 3-to-1 voting rights in place. And so the mission of the board is a mystery to the community members. We need a clear and transparent mission that we can work together on and not be.
All right, thank you, sir.
Kelly Schneider. And then Kathy Puleo. Or Paleo.
Good afternoon. I'd like to say ditto to all of my neighbors that spoke before me. Mine was the warm and fuzzy speech to kind of make you cry a little. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just letting you know that our feelings are real. This is really going on for us. This happens every time we go to a board meeting. We are denied, we are lied to. And Mr. Baumgartner, it sounds wonderful what you said, but it's not true. The things that you want people to believe are not true. Ours is real. We worked hard, and now we retired to a community that I had to unretire to appreciate because I had to go back to teaching to afford my dues. Is that fair? No, it's not for the self-serving people that run our board of directors and our declarant. We ask, please help us to help others who may be in our same predicament. And we thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Sorry for butchering your name.
Make it real quick. My 3 minutes went down to seconds. Thank you for having us. I'm Kathy Puleo. I lived on the shore all my life, went to Northwest PA for 40 years, came back 4 years ago. So I'm just saying, Mr. Clark, please help us out. Your little committee that was going to do it. Thank you very much.
No pressure, Andrew. All right, thank you very, very much for all the public comments. Does any member of the work group have any additional comments, thoughts for the good of the order? All right, if not, I really appreciate everybody's input and your time. We've got a number of different issues to chomp on, but that's what we signed up for. So with that, the committee shall rise.
The Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C311.